Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In this one, I'm taking a look at Spider-Gwen with her latest uniform and her upgrade in both PvE and PvP. It has been quite some time since a character has come out that functions really well in both modes, so you can build her as a hybrid. Most people know how this character kind of functions in PvE now. She's really strong there. So one of the things I'm highlighting in this video is how she performs on the PvP side, but I'll still include her performance in PvE as well, just because it's pretty ridiculous even without the damage proc that I'm running. So for all of the testing that I did, I'm using a mighty CTP of authority, both in PvE and in PvP, and it kind of gives you an idea how the character functions as a baseline or minimally in PvE. You can see how much better she can get if you actually use a single skill damage proc or even a multi-skill damage proc. The standard first test that I did was a stage 9 of Knull without a leadership or support, and she essentially cleared it faster than any other character that I've tested so far. She basically did the fight in 1 minute and 15 seconds flat. Because the character clearly is very strong for PvE, I decided to take her into stage 29 with the same setup, and she was still able to clear that fight with 30 seconds remaining. If I'm not mistaken, this is the first character in the female restriction that was able to clear stage 29 without leadership and support. I previously tried with Shuri, Makari, and Kamala Khan, but they had a leadership and support and were able to get somewhat of a similar clear time as Spider-Gwen can without a leadership and support, which shows you how crazy she is. Adding in the leadership and support, she's easily able to clear this stage and does it about 2 minutes faster than she previously did without it. If you're wondering why the character's damage output is so bonkers, it's because her kit is just stacked with damage buffs and attack increases, and she has a lot of skills that she can layer on top of one another very easily. She has a 40% basic attack increase on her uniform passive, a 35% physical attack increase on her tier 1 passive, 40% skill damage and 25% bonus damage on her tier 2 passive, a 1.5% damage accumulation increase on her 3rd skill, which is just crazy, 30% attack increase on her 4th skill, and 120% basic attack increase proc on her 5th skill. And if that wasn't enough, her Awakened skill also adds an additional 25% attack increase, as well as a ton of Ignore Dodge and other buffs there. And the T4 skill adds chain hit damage and additional attack on top of that. Because of this, I expect many people will likely want to build her for PvE, especially considering that she is a speed, female, hero, human character that fills a lot of restrictions in various different modes. So if you do want to build her for that, the build that will give you the most value overall across multiple modes would be a CTP of Rage. However, you can definitely make her function with a single skill damage proc, like an Energy or a Destruction, because she is extremely proc friendly. So essentially, if you build her with a CTP of Rage, you're mostly going to be making the character better for score-based modes like ABX and ABL, which a lot of people will build her for that. She'll also function better in Giant Boss Raid. However, a CTP of Energy or Destruction should make her function a little bit better in World Boss Legend content, but obviously not as well in the other game modes. If you're kind of torn on how you want to use the character and maybe you want to get the most value out of her because you don't have a lot of T4s, a CTP of Destruction is a good middle option since it will give you a good amount of value in PvP and PvE. However, it won't be as much as if you had a dedicated build specifically for PvP and specifically for PvE. She was able to clear the first phase of Giant Boss Raid Dormammu in about 1 minute and 20 seconds, which is well above average compared to other characters, since usually the character that I test would have to be level 80 to be able to complete it in that amount of time. When I took the character to level 80 and did stage 29 of Knull without a leadership and support, she basically did it as quick as the level 29 clear I did previously, where I did include a leadership and support. So the level 80 upgrade essentially gave her all of the value that that lead and support gave her when she was at level 70. Because she cleared stage 29 fairly quickly without that lead and support, I wanted to see what stage she could push to, adding in the leadership and support. When I tested on stage 59, she was able to complete that with close to 2 minutes left, which meant that she could go even higher without that damage proc and still being level 80. I believe the next highest stage that I could test was somewhere in the 80s, but I was curious to see if she could actually do stage 99, because if I could do that, then I obviously could do the lower stage, and if she could do stage 99 with no damage proc at level 80, that would mean that she's just absolutely insane in PvE. And the fact is that she basically almost did. I was only around 15 seconds short of being able to do this without a damage proc, meaning that with a damage proc, she should easily be able to smash this. Looking at other world boss legends, I took her into a stage 64 of Mephisto, and she was obviously able to clear that because she had a type advantage. And something that I didn't mention earlier is that she can also leverage the leadership support like White Fox because she has the leadership tag, which makes her even more prominent in PvE because she can utilize such an insane support. If you thought the stage 99 performance was kind of crazy, this was one that really surprised me. She can basically do a stage 44 of Gore. I was essentially able to clear it with no time remaining, with no damage proc at level 80, which is quite insane since there are characters that struggle to do this with a damage proc with the same kind of setup or conditions. The last one was kind of a stretch, but I wanted to see how she would do versus a stage 29 of Jean, which is pretty high for a level 80 character with no proc, but I wanted to see just how she would do because I wanted to compare to her performance once I took her to T4. She obviously couldn't do this, but you'll see how she improved when I did upgrade her. Upgrading the character to T4, I noticed that her HP was a little bit behind some of the top speed types like Spider-Man, but overall was still pretty good. The thing that really stood out was that she got a massive 23,000 physical attack increase when going from 80 to T4, which is pretty massive if you just add that to the pile of buffs and all other things that she has going for her in PvE. In terms of strikers to use in PvE specifically, you essentially just want to use the highest level T3 Awakened or T4 character that you have that has that Justice tag, so you can get the maxed out T4 skill effect. However, in ABX and ABL, Thor still proved to be the best striker because of the damage that he puts out exceeding the benefit that you get from having a maxed out T4 skill. So for those, Thor is better. And for PvP, it's a little bit different. Spider-Man proved to be the best option there because he has the Justice tag, he has an iframe ignore as a striker, and he has a high amount of penetration as well as a ton of other CC effects and abilities in his skill. After that, you have Hulk because he is just his tag and also has penetration and a damage increase in iframe ignore on that skill as well. And then third is Black Widow because she also has iframe ignore but lacks penetration from the other two strikers that provide the same thing. And she also is just as tagged. With that T4 skill unlocked, I was able to improve her clear time on stage 59 by about a minute. And this time around, with that T4 skill and again no damage proc, I was able to clear stage 99 of Knull, which I think is still wild that a character can do this with no damage proc. Versus Mephisto on the same stage, and with the T4 her clear time improved by around a minute and 40 seconds. Versus Gore, the improvement was very similar, close to a minute and 30 seconds. One of the nice benefits with the T4 this time around is that the character ends up being actually pretty tanky since you can constantly spam that T4 skill, and it makes her very durable because you can just tank a lot of hits without taking any damage at all from that skill. So if you're having any problem surviving at level 70 or 80, then that really shouldn't be a problem once you get the T4 skill, or if you get the T4 skill. It wasn't so noticeable for me since I'm running an invincible build for the character, but the T4 skill made her noticeably more tanky. I could basically just attack at all times, even if the boss was doing those penetration skills, and I knew that the character would survive because of the T4. And on top of that, I would also get that extra damage. I could use her iframe ignore skill oftentimes when the boss would go in their iframe skills that I would normally have to dodge. And if you have the artifact, you also get the added bonus that when you get hit, you can keep attacking even if the boss is in iframe, since you'll get the iframe ignore across all of your skills. What I just mentioned plays a pretty big role in the Jean fight, since she constantly goes into those penetration and iframe skills, and if you have her T4, you can essentially just keep attacking and ignoring the damage that she does that you would normally have to avoid, meaning that you can end up clearing the stage much faster with the T4 skill taking into consideration that on top of the damage increase and other benefits that you get. I still wasn't able to clear this stage, but I did get pretty close. I got to the last 6 health bars, and I think if I played it a little bit better, I actually might have been able to, or at least gotten even closer, maybe to the last 3 health bars. So with a better build, I might have been able to do it without a damage proc, which I still think is insane for a character to be able to do something like this, because for comparison, I have Shadow Shell with a brilliant judgment that can sometimes fail this stage because I have to constantly dodge and avoid damage from Jean and end up burning a lot of time. Besides the fact that the character can push to high stages of World Boss Legend and meet those frequent restrictions of being either human, speed, female, and hero, she obviously also has that same capability in Alliance Battle Extreme, where that is one of the restrictions. And she actually performs really well in ABX and is probably the meta for that particular day, both in ABX and in ABL. I mean, you can guess that the character will be meta for these days just from seeing this clip. I was able to score close to 11.4 million on my first try without a damage proc. So with a single skill damage proc, she should score somewhere close to 12 or 13 million, and then with a rage that pretty much is around 2 million more, so somewhere around 15 million, possibly, depending on your build, maybe even more than that. The only real downside of using the character in ABX is that she doesn't have all of the different attributes for the different seasons, so she doesn't have burn, and I believe she doesn't have silence. So you kind of need to take the character to T4 so that you can put in a striker to be able to have that cancel effect available to you. In ABL, it's a little bit different since I believe that she does have all of the cancel effects, but even if she doesn't, you can basically do the same thing with the T4 striker and get the effects from that. You can see from this clip that I was able to score close to 5 million with no damage proc, which for most other characters that I've tested at T4 with the same kind of setup, I was able to score somewhere in the 3.8 or 4 million range, which shows you that the character is well above average compared to them. And again, with a single skill damage proc, that's usually about 1 million more, so close to 6 million, and with a rage that is roughly around 2 million more than that, so somewhere around 7 or 8 million, and possibly more, again, depending on your build. The character is undoubtedly meta for the human-female days, but I believe that Gamora will still end up outscoring her for the speed ones specifically. The rotation for the character is really easy. You do 3 cancel so that you get that damage accumulation effect going. Then you do a 4 very slight delay cancel, maybe about a half second or less. You essentially can almost cancel the skill. So you do that, and then you do the 5th skill, and that is the one that you finish on because it has that single skill damage proc applied to it. So the rotation is 3 cancel 4, slight delay cancel 5. When you have the awakening available to you, the rotation does become a little bit trickier for the timing at least. You do 3 cancel 6, or your awakening skill, and then wait about 2 Mississippi counts after the 2 characters have landed on the ground. Then you can cancel and do the 4 slight delay cancel 5. You have to make sure to do maybe around a 2 Mississippi count when the characters land on the ground before the rockets and all the other damage starts to come out. Otherwise, if you cancel before that, you lose out all the damage from the 6th skill entirely. Then, when you get the character to T4, you essentially want to use the T4 skill whenever it's available to you, and ideally when the boss or whatever you're facing is attacking, so that you can tank that damage and keep attacking them, while also getting that extra damage proc activated when you end up dodging. Besides that, you might also want to weave in the 1st and 2nd skill to fill up your T4 faster, and because the 2nd skill does a good amount of damage. I usually do the 1 and 2 before going into the 3 cancel, and then after I finish the rotation. Although the character does amazing in PvE, I feel like a lot of people are immediately dismissing her PvP value just because they get so much usage out of her in PvE, and because her PvE performance is kind of overshadowing her PvP potential. I obviously built her for PvP, mostly because I play Alliance Conquest, and because I generally enjoy kind of the PvP side, and don't really have much incentive to build her for ABX and ABL, since I am not competitive in that mode, and getting higher scores won't really matter much. Besides that, I expect the next speed human female character to probably overshadow her in those modes, so I'm preemptively just building her for PvP since she does have usage there. The character isn't necessarily timeline meta or amazing as is. She actually needs a lot of pieces in place to make her good. One of them being an artifact. So if you notice from these clips, the orange icon with the hexagon is the artifact that I actually have, and you can see how often that activates for her to gain the bonus from that usage, which is that when she dodges, she gets iframe ignore across any of the skills when that thing is active. The artifact actually does make a huge difference for PvP and is one of the reasons why she has viability in that mode, on top of the fact that she also has 40% guaranteed dodge, which makes her tanky in that sense because she doesn't have any mitigation at all, which is a pretty annoying shortcoming, but it seems like most spider characters like Spider-Man and other ones like that have no mitigation but have other things to make up for it. And besides that, she also has that iframe ignore counter on the third skill that also provides her with the 30% penetration to all sources. The third skill is actually pivotal to her kit and is one of the reasons why she essentially becomes so good in PvP, and it's because she also gets the healing from that skill and the damage accumulation buff increase across all of her skills. And the AI usually does the third skill or the fifth skill to open with, depending on what the opponent's doing. Usually it's the fifth skill first, but if she does the third skill and then goes into the fifth skill, she essentially just one-shots anything as long as she can get through the invincible that the opponent has. You can see from these clips that the character is actually quite good. I do end up losing sometimes versus some of the revive metas, but she does end up actually taking out either one life or multiple lives of some of the revive metas, and in some instances can actually win entirely just at level 70, not even level 80 or T4, which again is pretty crazy for a character at that level since she's fighting T4 characters with full builds. Despite the fact that she also has those penalties from the level 70 to 80 and T4 difference. One of the other things that people forget is that she is one of the rare characters that is awakened that is also for PvP and can reach T4. There aren't really many characters that can do that, so one of the benefits is that if she can survive for 30 seconds, she instantly has access to that awakening skill, and in Alliance Conquest, all she needs to do is beat the first team to be able to instantly wipe out the second with that awakening activation. One of the other things I forgot to mention is that the character also has high skill priority, meaning that she will often go into her skills first, meaning that you get the benefits of them, whether it's damage buffs or invincibility from the fourth skill, or the penetration, healing, and iframe ignore from the third skill. This actually does make a noticeable difference if you have the artifact, because if the opponent knocks you out of your skills, you can potentially activate that artifact and gain the benefits of multiple skills that you were going through, since you can use any of them when you have that iframe ignore activated from the artifact. So you can potentially cycle through multiple skills, gain the advantage of the effects that they have, like the penetration from the third skill, potentially going into the invincible in the fourth skill, or the 120% proc in the fifth skill, and just have all of those combined effects at once. So I mentioned that there are two pieces to make the character work at a higher level than average in PvP. One of them is the artifact, and the other I found is to add some form of mitigation to her kit, usually through something like a support or possibly the CTP option that you choose. I noticed that the mitigation made a noticeable difference, mostly because she doesn't have any mitigation whatsoever, so it greatly boosts her survival, but also because the more hits that she can take, the more reliably she can activate her artifact, which is based on dodge, and then go into her iframe skills, or basically any skills, because she has that iframe, and she also gains that added bit of ignore dodge as well. On top of that, the character often faces villain characters that are universal, so they do a little bit of extra damage to her because there's no type advantage disadvantage thing going on, but also because if you're facing characters like Warlock, you get the mitigation from the type advantage, and adding that little bit of extra mitigation means that you could potentially tank his second skill, especially if the opponent has a proc. You could end up dodging and mitigating a bunch of that damage and end up surviving and not only beating his one life, but also taking him out entirely. The added benefit is that if you survive long enough, you also get the benefit of the Awakening skill, which can potentially take out your opponents just from that skill alone. Because of these reasons, and because she already has the offensive capability for taking out these characters even without a damage proc, I would recommend building her for survival first. The initial option that I went with is a Steel Authority, since I can stack the mitigation with that support to get even more mitigation, and if I'm facing someone like Adam, I can get even more so because of the type advantage. The other reason I went with Authority is when I compared her to Spider-Man. Spider-Man also has that extra layer of dodge from his artifact. He also has invisibility. He also has higher health pool, meaning that he can heal more, and has a lower cooldown on his healing. And besides that, he also has the ability to do a ton of damage because of that ignore mitigation that he has in his kit, as well as the villain damage and stuff. So the offensive capability also doubles as survivability, since the opponent can't attack you if they're dead. For that reason, I opted for the Authority as opposed to the regen that I would have put on her if she had something similar like Spider-Man. That said, if you don't go with the mitigation stacking strat, then Steel Authority won't really add too much. She does get the added benefit that she gets the Invincible to activate because her AI doesn't really go into the fourth skill too often. But other than that, a CTP of regen should actually work pretty decently because her health pool isn't too far off Spider-Man, and their kits are pretty similar because she constantly spams the third skill to heal. Besides that, you can also go with a Destruction to get that penetration from the fifth skill right away, but like I mentioned, the character doesn't really need too much offensive capability, and you don't really benefit too much from the artifact if you don't have a survival build to be able to dodge more often. I don't really think the character will be utilized in Timeline because there are so many top meta options there that even on certain weeks where the ban list is kind of heavy, there are still some potentially better options than her. But if the ban list is pretty extensive, she potentially has a spot there, but regardless, I did try her out on manual just to see if she could beat some of the top options there, and surprisingly enough, I was able to actually beat Wolverine's 2 lives and the 2 lives of Adam Warlock and Jean Grey. If you're wondering how I was able to win this, it's a little bit of a combination of luck and also because I'm able to spam multiple skills that have iframe on them because of the artifact. And because I can do that, I can also fill up my T4 faster, which allows me to counter some specific counters to her, like Wolverine that has the type advantage, or things like Warlock with a proc that can potentially one-shot me. So you saw at the end there, once I got my T4 skill, I was able to burst down Wolverine down to his artifact before he could kill me, since I could ignore those multiple hits. And then because she lived long enough, I could just end up taking him out completely after his artifact was gone. In Alliance Conquest, I was only able to get 4 fights in, but I went up versus some of the meta characters to see how she does at the high end. She was able to take out at least 1 life of these characters pretty consistently, but oftentimes would die on the revive for characters like Jean because she wouldn't have enough health left over. Because of this, I was thinking that in some cases taking out the debuff leadership or even the mitigation and putting in a reflect character like Destroyer, for example, might be enough to take out Jean's first life, and when she respawns, take out her second life from the lingering damage that ends up from the first life to be able to win the fight entirely that way. I think that potential strategy could work well versus Warlock too, since he could potentially reflect himself down pretty quickly in the first life and then she could beat him in the second life, but I currently just tested with the mitigation stacking and she was at least taking out 1 life of these top metas fairly consistently. You can see from the previous clips that the Invincible from the Authority is activating almost all the time, even if the top proc isn't, so she is benefiting from that Invincible activation, and she's also getting the added accumulation from that CTP of Authority on top of the third skill that she often goes into right after. You can see that in this clip, the Invincible and the mitigation stacking was enough to be able to survive the Adam Warlock and beat both of his lives. So you can see that even if the character isn't necessarily able to take out both lives of some of these meta characters, the fact that she can wipe some of these top level characters means that she is a great asset for you in things like Alliance Conquest. Overall, I'd easily recommend this uniform to people. She is pretty great value for her cost. She not only is one of the top speed meta characters now, if not the best speed character overall, because of her PvE performance, her relevance in ABX, ABL, and World Boss Legend, but she also can be built as a dedicated PvP character and functions quite well there if you have the right pieces. I'd argue that even if you do end up getting this character to level 80 with something like a CTP of Destruction, and even without her artifact, that you would get tons more value for her cost compared to many other characters in game, if not the most from her cost alone, because this is obviously not considering native tier 2 characters. The only thing that I would caution against is to maybe rush to build this character to T4 specifically for ABX or ABL if you aren't really competitive and a high score or even higher score doesn't really matter too much for you, because oftentimes it seems that those characters are replaced pretty regularly, and with Luna character being sort of the baby for Marvel Future Fight, they might go all out for her and just make her absolutely insane for that. But that's just speculation on my part, and regardless, getting the character to level 80 or even level 70 will still add a ton of value to anyone's roster, regardless whether they focus on PvE or PvP. That does it for this one. I'm looking forward to see what the next update might bring. I'm kind of expecting it'll be something related to Secret Invasion or something, or possibly some of these summer uniforms. Don't forget, if you did enjoy the video, please consider liking, subscribing, leaving a comment, and possibly sharing it with others so it helps them out as well. I always appreciate people taking the time to watch these, so thank you. But the video is now over.